You're listening to Parents You've Got This, the expert guide to parenthood, the complete guide to fertility, pregnancy, birth, baby and parenthood. This podcast is proudly supported by Mistela, a natural origin skincare for babies and children, recommended by healthcare professionals. Mistela by Parents' Side since 1950.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Expert Guide to Parenthood podcast. We're your hosts, Christy Hopwood and Freya Owen, and we love talking about all things parenthood. And today we're going to be talking about our sleep category. We're going to be talking about how to get your baby into a sleep rhythm or a sleep routine.
We are joined today by the co-founders of Infant Sleep Australia and the Sombelle Sleep Programs. We have Dr. Fallon Cook and Dr. Laura Conway here, both with amazing PhDs. They have done extensive study on childhood and sleep and come to us today so well versed to be able to provide us with all the insights we need into how to set our baby's sleep motions or rhythms or whatever you want to call it into place. So thank you very much, Laura and Fallon, for being with us today.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Now let's start with the basics. So what is a sleep schedule or sleep rhythms? What do you like to call it?
Yeah. So look, a sleep schedule is when often parents really want to have a bit of a pattern to their child's sleep across the day. So a sleep schedule or sleep pattern, it's really just describing, when they're going to wake up, when they're going to nap, maybe how long they're going to nap for, and then when bedtime is as well. But yeah, there's huge sort of variability in different sleep schedules, and really super important that we are always thinking about what that unique baby or toddler or child is actually needing in terms of their sleep. It's really important we don't sort of push age-based schedules that are quite rigid. Definitely better off trying to cater to the individual child.
Yeah, and that's really important, isn't it? There's so much information out there and overload for parents about what they should or shouldn't be doing, and it can cause a lot of anxiety in parents trying to get their baby to sleep like a clock and wake them up at a certain time. But there must be some benefits around having some kind of schedule or routine. Can you talk about what those benefits are?
Yeah, well, we know that sleep loves structure, and often when a baby is freshly born, a newborn, they aren't yet ready to fall into a predictable daily rhythm because their tummies are so small, they need to feed so often, day and night, that really we just kind of let nature take its course and just feed them and let them have rest as often as they need. But as they get out of that newborn stage, then often it can be really helpful to promote better nighttime sleep, to have a slightly more predictable daily rhythm. It helps them build their sleep pressure really predictably and reliably during the day, which means that there's a really good chance of them starting to do longer stretches of sleep overnight in an age-appropriate manner.
Which is what we all want.
Yes, that's right.
So you talk about it not being, realistic so much in the newborn phase. At what age is it time to try and work out this rhythm? Is it at 12 weeks or is it a little bit further down the track?
Look, I think it's so highly variable depending on what parents actually want. So for some parents, their babies just naturally fall into a fairly predictable pattern and they never have to take sort of purposeful steps towards developing, a special daily rhythm. And for others, their baby's sleep seems to be really super erratic and they're like, oh my gosh, I really, really just need a bit of predictability to my day. So generally what we say is that, in the really early months, just having something like a regular bedtime and a regular wake-up time, that's about as much structure as I would put on a day for a newborn baby. From around about 12 weeks up to around 4 months, often that's when parents find it useful to start thinking, okay, they need about this many naps and, I know that roughly these times they're ready for those naps, and having particularly a predictable bedtime and wake-up time is a really good place to start if parents are feeling a little bit lost and it's very kind of up and down. Just having those two things, quite predictable can really, set the tone for the whole day. They start to need their naps at around about the same time, and a bit of predictability can start to come about at that point. But I think it's really important that parents really just decide whether having a sort of structure to the day is for them or not. There shouldn't really be any clear right or wrong. It's really down to individual parents if that's something they want to have, or if they'd rather just go with the flow and see where sleep goes.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Because it all changes so quickly.
Yeah.
And I think you're right at that sort of that newborn 4-month mark. You are seeing patterns naturally anyway, but they do just keep evolving. So it's sort of a bit of a minefield to get your head around, which is why the set or ish bedtimes and wake times is helpful for some form of continuity.
Yeah, and I love that you talk a little bit about keeping a sleep diary to help you start to work out what some of those rhythms are. I know with one of my babies, there was definitely no rhythm. He was just up all the time. That was his rhythm. His FOMO of life, and he's still like this. An old kid now, but he never wants to miss out, and he finds it really hard to sleep still. So, they can all be different, whereas like my daughter, she just slept through, and I thought, I was a great parent. No, nothing to do with me.
Just like
the second one showed me that. So why do you keep sort of a sleep diary or whatnot when you're trying to work out how much sleep they're having?
Yeah, it can be really useful to log your baby's sleep for roughly a week or two. There are apps that you can use. Lots of parents will log sleep and feeds and nappy changes and all sorts. Or you can just have a piece of paper that you note things down on, or on your notes app on your phone. And it just starts to give you an idea of what's happening for your baby's sleep. It can be really informative, as with many things in life, when you have a perception of what something is like in your life, and then you start to note it down and you realise that perhaps things aren't quite as you thought they were. So some parents may think, my child's waking up at 7 every day, and then when they actually just start to log it in a diary, they realise, no, it's more like 6 or 6:30, and they can then start to see some patterns emerging for how long it's taking their baby to fall asleep for naps, for example, how many naps they're having, whether some naps in the day are particularly tricky and others are easier. So it just really can be a really good tool to help parents get a deeper understanding of where their baby is at, and then also give them some clues for any changes that they would like to make.
So is it your recommendation that parents then use that as a tool to develop their family's schedule? And then how does that work in practice?
Yeah, definitely. A sleep diary can, if you track your baby's sleep over the course of a week, you're going to start to get a sense of around about how much sleep they average per 24 hours. And that can be really valuable information because it gives you a sense of how you might kind of divvy up their sleep. Like if they have this much day sleep, how much sleep could you expect overnight? So maybe if they average 14 hours of sleep per 24 hours and they're always having about 3 hours of day sleep, well, you've got about 11 hours that they might be able to do overnight. So it can help parents to just have, I suppose, realistic expectations around what their, how much sleep their child needs and how they might have that across the day and the night. And from there, you can start to plan a little bit. So those parents in that instance might go, okay, let's make sure we cap the day sleep at 3 hours so that we can keep our 11 hours overnight. So it's just a bit of an example of how you might use that data in the diary to think about what sort of daily rhythm is going to be well suited to your child. And that's generally a lot more helpful than, there's plenty online, there's plenty of rigid age-based schedules that say all babies this age must do this particular thing. But there are so many babies that just don't fit those schedules, and it drives parents mad, and they're spending hours trying to settle a baby who maybe just doesn't need that sleep. So yeah, much better to be led by your own baby than an online schedule that you found.
Yeah, great.
And so you say that you're starting to try and establish a sort of a rhythm or a schedule for your baby. Should you be waking them then to try and fit more with that schedule?
Yeah, it's absolutely fine to wake a sleeping baby. I know there's lots of information out there that says never wake a sleeping baby. But if you are trying to help your baby fall into a more predictable daily rhythm, and you are thinking about, looking at putting some limits around how much day sleep they have so that we can push more sleep into the night, for example, if that's one of your aims, then yeah, it makes sense that you would wake your baby from their naps and wake your baby up in the morning. We do tend to suggest having a sense of how long your baby's sleep cycles are, so that when you are waking them, you wake them at the end of a sleep cycle. So many babies have a sleep cycle of about 45 minutes, some a little bit shorter than that, some a little little bit longer than that. So if you're thinking about waking your baby, you want to, say it's a 45-minute sleep cycle length, you'd be looking at maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours 15 when you would wake them, rather than waking them at an hour where they're actually in the next sleep cycle, and then they might feel a bit grotty and grumpy when you know how that feels. Yeah, absolutely. It can be really awful.
Yeah, I think babies must be tuned to wake parents in the middle of the sleep cycle.
Yes.
I think it's just
I'm all for waking them. Payback. You want to wake me up in the night?
So what are the other factors that might negatively impact a baby's sleep rhythm?
Look, I think probably the most common things we see is, parents say, we had a bit of a groove going. Things were going pretty well. We had a bit of predictability, and then they either just got older, so they outgrew that schedule, and that can take a bit of scrabbling to figure out, what's the new sort of daily rhythm going to look like, or illness comes along, or for older babies it could be a bit of separation anxiety, teething, or a big change like starting childcare. Sometimes these things can really throw our babies and toddlers, and all of a sudden, the schedule you've had just isn't working, and it's time to kind of rethink what's going to be more realistic. So if there has been a big life change like starting childcare, or they've just gotten older, you might be thinking, okay, is it time to drop a day nap and rejig that schedule? Or if they're unwell, it might just be that we've got to throw that schedule out the window until they get better. And then once they're better, and if you think, we need to get back on that schedule, well, that's when you'll start to implement it again.
So I guess how much sleep then, if we're not doing something rigid, but give parents a rough idea of, what a schedule potentially would look like for, say, a 3-month-old?
So a 3-month-old, may have somewhere between, as much as 16 hours sleep need, or as low as maybe a 12-hour sleep need. So wide range of normal for a 3-month-old baby. And so how many naps and how long those naps are will vary based on how much sleep your particular 3-month-old has. Often we'd be seeing around that 3-month mark a bit of a rhythm starting to come into play, and at that age maybe 4 naps a day. Some babies at 3 months might already be down to 3 naps, but if you have a little baby who cat naps a lot, only sleeps in there like 1 sleep cycle at a time, they might stay on more naps for longer. So you may have a 3-month-old who's having 5 cat naps a day, for example.
And what about at 6 months?
Yeah, at 6 months, things are definitely becoming a little bit more predictable for most families, not all, but certainly as they move past 3 months, their circadian rhythm really starts to mature. So that's when we tend to get a bit more predictability. At 6 months of age, we've still got a really wide range of typical amount of sleep that a baby might need, and they all have their own unique amount that they need. So if you line up a bunch of 6-month-olds, they're probably all going to have slightly different sleep needs. So it's hard to suggest a particular schedule. But what I would be thinking is, I'd say one of the things that parents of 6-month-olds sometimes struggle with is this idea that's very prevalent online that they all have to do 12 hours overnight.
7 till 7.
7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Yes, please. Yeah. I mean, it'd be lovely if we could just write a wish list and it would all come true. But often it doesn't. So if your baby, maybe they've got a 13-hour sleep need, well, if you're trying for 12 hours overnight, are they really going to make it through the day on 1 day nap? 1 hour of day nap, like very, very unlikely. So that's where it's, you'd be thinking about, okay, well, at 6 months, they're probably either on 2 or 3 naps. Maybe they're going to have 2.5 hours or so total day sleep. And then you can think about, well, how much does that leave kind of in the tank for them to do overnight, so that we're not putting them down too early for bed or expecting them to have this great long 12-hour stretch overnight if it's just not realistic for that particular baby. So
it's so frustrating when inevitably everyone has that one person in their orbit that does have that 7 till 7 sleeper.
Yes.
And so it's like there's that real life benchmark that's just out of reach and tantalisingly close.
Yes.
I didn't get one.
No, not did I.
And I think it's important for parents to know that, we do all have someone in our orbit who has a baby that has this really high sleep need. Doesn't mean that they've got better sleep. They're just getting the amount of sleep that baby needs. And if your baby needs less sleep, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong. It's just that you're going to have to cater to them a little bit differently to make sure that they're having good sleep and being settled when they need to be settled.
Yeah. What about at 9 months? Do your sleep needs change then?
So sleep needs tend to gradually decline across that first year. So they're, gradually sort of declining a little bit. So at 9 months, we'd expect babies to be on 2 naps per day at that point. There'd be very few who would still be on 3 at that point and still doing okay overnight. So most would be on 2 naps. And again, it's just about looking at how much sleep do they need. I would be coming up with a predictable bedtime, a predictable wake-up time that really fits their sleep needs. And usually that will keep their nights fairly on track as well.
And sometimes at that age, that's when separation anxiety can really rear its head. So sometimes we start to see some changes in how babies need to be settled at night and overnight if they are feeling anxious at being left. So that's quite a common time that we do see families reaching out for help.
What about the sleep needs at 12 months?
Do you want to speak to those?
Yeah, so at 12 months, we begin to see some babies dropping down to just 1 nap. Others will hold on to 2 naps until they're, even coming up to 18 months of age. But typically around 12 months, we will begin to see some older babies resisting their second nap or taking longer to fall asleep for their first nap. Or if their naps stay okay, sometimes they begin to wake early for the day because they're just achieving all of their sleep needs in a shorter time overnight. Wide range of normal. So some families are really taken by surprise when their 12-month-old is just down to 1 nap because they were expecting their baby to stay on 2 naps for a bit longer. And particularly when other people in their orbit with those babies that have higher sleep needs are still having 2 long naps a day. It can be a bit of a surprise to some parents, but just know it's actually quite normal if your baby does drop down to 1 nap at 12 months.
So are there any signs that you're ready to drop a nap, or is it just simply what you're saying, like you go to put them down and they're just not going to sleep?
There's a few different signs. So what we generally say is it could be any one of these things that is persisting for sort of a week or more. Things like if they're starting to push the first nap of the day really late, like you go to settle them and they're just having none of it, and then they push that first nap a bit late, which then means the last nap of the day is getting a little too close to bedtime. It might be that they are just refusing that last nap of the day. So a lot of parents will say, oh, they used to nap in their cot, but now we've got to get them out in the pram or the car to try and get them to sleep. Or bedtime might just suddenly be really, really challenging, or night waking has suddenly increased, or maybe they're waking really early in the morning. So if you're noticing one of those signs and it's about, they're about the right age to be dropping down a nap, and those signs are persisting, that's where I would say go for it, because if we keep waiting, often nights worsen and worsen, and then you've got a baby who's really tired in the day because they've had a tricky night, and then, they're trying to hold on to this nap that's actually what's causing the tricky nights.
And so when you go to actually drop the naps, how do you do that? Because that's quite a daunting sort of prospect, because you don't want to rock the boat completely. Do you suggest that if you're trying to drop the nap, you push it back and you find that sweet spot time, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we'd be looking at how much daytime sleep they need. So let's say they need 3 hours of daytime sleep. You'd probably find that you can keep them awake a little bit longer in the morning before you put them down for their first nap, and then that nap might be an hour and a half or 2 hours, and then they're quite likely to manage quite well before they need their next sleep. Sometimes we suggest that in that interim phase where they are between, let's say, 3 naps and 2 naps, or 2 naps and 1 nap, that they haven't managed to stay awake for as long as you would like before they go down for their first nap, and then they have a really long stretch awake before bedtime and they're just not going to be able to make it. You can just give them what we call a power nap, a bridging nap, which is just short, 15 or 20 minutes later on in the afternoon, just to get them through until bedtime. And then what we tend to see is that as the days go on, they begin to stay awake happily for a little bit longer before they go down for their first nap, and that need for that little bridging nap falls away.
Gosh, I wish that someone was planning my naps for me. That'd be nice. 3 naps a day, I'd like that. 1 nap, actually. A bridging nap. I'd take that any day. I'd take a bridging nap.
So when do you drop naps altogether? When do you no longer really have a schedule, or is your schedule just bedtime and wake up?
Yeah, so there's an astonishing range of variability when it comes to completely dropping day naps. Sometimes it's as early as 2 years of age. We've even seen, because we see a really wide range of cases in our clinics, sometimes even slightly before 2 years of age, some toddlers, they've got a bit of FOMO, they don't want to miss a thing.
That was my second. They're just like, he dropped it before he was supposed to.
Yeah, who wants to sleep? They've got things to do. But, then there are others that might even make it through to 3.5 years of age still having a day nap. So
my daughter slept till she went to school. So I literally had one
through prep too.
and I thought, how is she actually going to get to school? Because she's still sleeping in the holidays before then. I was like trying to wean her off, but she just couldn't get to night.
Yeah. So it really highlights that huge variability. Generally what we say is if you've got a 3-year-old or older who's having really challenging nights and they're still having a day nap, it's got to go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you both very much for talking to us all about how to get your little one into a sleep rhythm and how the sleep rhythms adjust as well as they get older. That was very helpful.
It's been a pleasure.
A huge thanks to Mistela for sponsoring this episode. Babies can feel unsettled during seasonal changes or when they are feeling under the weather, causing restless nights. Mistela's soothing chest rub, suitable from birth, is enriched with naturally derived extracts of pine, rosemary and chamomile to help relax and soothe your baby. Perfect for gentle massages, it leaves a calming, refreshing scent to help your little one's well-being at bedtime for a more peaceful night's sleep. Mistela is our family's favourite.
Thanks for tuning into the Expert Guide to Parenthood podcast. Never forget, parents, you've got this.
Join a Parents You've Got This masterclass today to be prepared, excited and educated for pregnancy, birth, baby and parenthood. Visit www.parentsyou'vegotthis.com.au and sign up for a masterclass today.
The information provided in this podcast is general in nature and is intended to support, not replace, a discussion with your doctor or healthcare professional. Parents You've Got This take no responsibility for any medical decisions made by individuals based on the information provided in this podcast.